Hey everyone, George Christie here with Wine Industry Network. Welcome to another episode of the Win Educational Webinar Series. We've got a really good one to kick off 2025 today. It's presented by Vinoshipper, and it's the Vinoshipper 2025 National Direct Sales Annual Report. I know most of you are familiar with Vinoshipper, but for those of you who may not be, Vinoshipper, I think, works with more wineries on their direct-to-consumer business than any other company across North America. And why that's important is they have access to terrific data as it relates to purchasing behavior, club behavior, and all that data combined with a robust survey that went out in 2024 is essentially what culminated in the presentation that you are about to hear. So I'm glad you could join us. I think you're going to really enjoy what you're about to hear. Today's presentation is going to be presented by Taylor Harrison. Taylor is the analyst at Vinoshipper, and he's going to be joined by Paul Swigger, who is the business development manager. So once again, thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Vinoshipper, for all your hard work. And I'm going to kick it off to Taylor and Paul and let them take it from here. Take it away, guys.
Thanks, George. And good afternoon, wine industry. Thank you for joining us today. We're really excited to be here and present the third annual Vinoshipper DTC report. This one's a bit special because we're doing it with a webinar, and also that we're adding in survey data from the survey that was sent out earlier this year. So a bit about myself. I've been in the wine industry most of my professional life. I started at Constellation Brands, moved to the London International Vintners Exchange over in the UK, and I've been at Vinoshipper now for a couple of years. And I'm joined by the tremendous Paul Swigger.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being able to take the time and join us. Thank you, Taylor, and thank you, Win. My name is Paul Swigger. I have spent the majority of my professional career in the wine industry as well, in a variety of different facets, from wholesale and sales to direct-to-consumer fulfillment, and joined Vinoshipper in 2024. So really excited to be here and dive into some of this data.
And where's this data coming from? George made a great point. Vinoshipper works with producers all across the country. That's our main focus, is helping everyone in every part of the beverage alcohol industry, actually, across the entire nation. So we work with 3,200 producers, which is where this data is coming from. A majority of those are wineries, but we also support cideries, meaderies, distilleries, and we release reports throughout the year on those distinct industries as well. The survey was new this year, and it was completed by 220 participants, and we thank you so much for doing that. It's gave us a tremendous amount of information that we're going to share today. During the webinar, we're going to point out on the bottom left corner whether data is coming from Vinoshipper or whether data is coming from the survey. And so that'll just help you kind of understand whether it's transactional or whether it's more opinion-based. And so let's get started. Adrian's going to be working behind the scenes. She's our marketing communications at Vinoshipper, and she's built these lovely slides for us to talk about. Now, what have we seen in the data this year? So there is that general sentiment in the market that growth is slowing, and we've seen that as well. 2022 was a tough year for the industry, kind of a drop-off from sales that came during the COVID period. 23 was a slight bit of recovery, but it was more, relative to a smaller base. And now 2024 is a bit of a normalized year compared to 2023, but it's not as bad out there as it seems. So we've seen a bit of a normalization. Volume is trending up, and so is value. And Paul, what are our ideas of where that's coming from?
Yeah, I think throughout the market history over the past handful of years, there's been a lot of conversations about premiumization of wine, of those sales reflecting consumers' desire to have a higher price point bottle of wine. We've seen through a variety of different studies that came out in the spring that, bottom lower facing or lower priced wines were starting to slump, while that plus $35 bottle price seems to stabilize and increase. I think we're seeing the same thing here. For the 2024 year, kind of looking into 2025, I think we're starting to see some regional stabilization, some smaller brands that are working really, really well. And, when we look at this data, I think it's important to note that, kind of one of our mantras for going into 2025 is no one size fits all, and you're going to get what you put into it. And so where we look at this data and onto the other side, we're going to start to see that final quarter picking up of 2024. But it's really nice to see across the board that it does seem to be stabilizing as opposed to what we were seeing, 18 months ago, something along those lines.
Yeah. And so if we jump into the next slide here, this is going to be from the survey data. And this really kind of caught us, with a bit of a surprise. So most producers, or 36%, are saying that sales are down, but 62% are mentioning that sales are flat to up. So that's 6 out of 10 producers are having a flat to up year last year in sales, which really follows our mantra of, the industry data, the industry is not a one size fits all model. We really want to focus, and a focus that we're taking with when we're speaking to clients is localized. What's working for you, and this is great to see. And we're going to dive further into what the actual makeup of this down, up, and flat data is, because there's pockets of the region that are doing very well, and then there's other ones where it may be time to look at new strategies. But
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry, Paul.
Oh, no, I was going to just say that, yes, it's been a challenging handful of years. Everyone had a really beautiful bluebird couple years for sales. People have had to adjust, that dreaded term from a period of years ago, pivot. I think we're well past that. And as we start to see this stabilization, yes, it's challenging. Yes, there's a lot of competition in the market, not just in the own wine brands, but in other options for consumers to get into. But it's really exciting to see some of this, not be too down, not be so, it might be the doldrums, the wind might not be blowing, but I don't believe it's a storm.
It's a great way to put it. And we're going to start, diving deeper into the data with the one place that, most producers work with, and that's the tasting room. So right here, this is coming from Vinoshipper. This is your average order value by channel, major channels being e-commerce, club, and POS. Pretty much all trending up to the right, which is, a factor of prices increasing, but also people purchasing higher price bottles of wines. The only down time was in 2020, actually, Paul, which is interesting, was when was COVID, right? So more market entrants came, there was larger pricing, the tasting room wasn't, as a large of a channel as the other ones, but we've seen a big recovery, and the tasting room be one of the places where, the highest AOV is captured. And, our theories around that are it's more personal. Again, you can connect with people. Isn't that right?
Yeah, when you look at that experience, people are still wanting to go out, wanting to be out in tasting rooms, being able to have that touch point that producer will be able to have and their staff around generating brand awareness or brand education, being able to, I affectionately, this is not my quote, but it comes from Maison Louis Latour, creating apostles. So you have people who are coming out, experiencing it, willing to pay for the tasting room experience. But to sidebar that a little bit, I think e-commerce is fascinating. We've seen a lot of wineries, that are non-traditional brick and mortar, whether it's an urban tasting room or maybe not a tasting room at all. And we're starting to see, those e-commerce numbers just continue to climb year after year after year. And I think that's really fascinating because it speaks to both sides of the coin. One is that the point of sale, what we consider point of sale, that interactive tasting room experience is really driving a lot of value. But not too far below it is that e-commerce experience that's being able to take clients that are engaging with the brand through e-commerce channels and capture those sales as well.
And you can't miss the elephant in the room, which is shipping. Wine is heavy, glass is heavy, and it's expensive to ship. And, the POS is a great place where they're loading those bottles into the back of the car. With e-commerce, shipping's involved, and that also does drive or can drive higher AOVs as the per bottle shipping price declines. So just, there's techniques in each channel here to drive your AOV and to connect with the customer. But the number one thing we saw is the tasting room is the most desired sales channel. In this next slide, we asked wineries what their current revenue distribution was and what their desired revenue distribution was. We thought this was an important question because it would show where efforts are being placed. As we can definitely see, the tasting room and club, there's a lot of revenue coming through those channels, and there's a lot of desire to get revenue through those channels because they're great channels. They're directly connected to the customer. But the interesting one, and the one with the biggest difference, was e-commerce. And so e-commerce is a really heavily desired channel, but it's not adding too much to their current revenue, Paul.
Yeah, number two as a driver, right, for revenue when it comes to club versus point of sale versus e-commerce. And I think it's people having a desire to, and this is a little speculative on my part. And, when I think, Taylor, about brand awareness, when I think about personalization, when I think about that beautiful Maison Louis Latour quote about creating apostles, you're able to do this with these touch points. And perhaps people are wanting to pull not products out of the wholesale or distribution channel by any means. That's not what I'm leaning towards, but leaning towards the idea that people are really having a desire to own their brand messaging, and be able to touch their consumers in the way that they have the most brand recognition and can stay true to their own brand instead of potentially getting lost in that three-tier system. But I'm also a gigantic fan of the DTC market. So I come with this with a little bit of a rose-colored glasses, I suppose, or a specific view of what the bright side is.
Yeah, if you can lock down a great tasting room, club, and e-commerce experience, it's going to pay dividends for your winery, and it's actually going to translate really well into the three-tier system in terms of having the information and having the customer base to expand into those other revenue streams. The second revenue stream here is club, and this next slide's a bit interesting. So what this shows, again, we asked our wineries, what's working well in club retention, and then why are people leaving? And so the first one makes sense. Product discounts. A lot of wineries, a lot of customers have come accustomed to expecting product discounts to be part of a club. And there's a lot of great things involved in that as well, such as member experiences, exclusive wines, flexible shipments. But if we go down to the cancellation factors, the first one is cost or financial reasons, which is directly focused on with product discounts. But the second one is there's too much wine. That never seemed like a problem before, but if people are canceling for having too much product and the retention factors other than flexible shipments aren't addressing that, then we would think there'd be more of a connection with getting people to consume. Is that right?
When we look at cancellation factors versus retention factors, or how those two balance each other out, when it comes to the issue of too much wine or too much inventory, I think it's important to have that experience for your consumers. And Taylor, you had said this great on some of these preparation calls that we had, that, the sale's not done until the bottle's empty, right? And there's potentially a reorder. So I've seen great experiences as myself as a personal club member of wineries that I belong to that are reaching out and providing a vintage chart or providing vertical tasting, webinars and seminars to make me reach into my cellar and pull out those bottles of wine. Now that's just my experience. But when you look at the other experiences that can be there, I think on the retention side of things, being able to have those exclusive wines and being able to have library wines are a great reason for clients and consumers, to continue to maintain their club memberships and be able to experience wines that they may not get otherwise. So, and that kind of comes to those exclusive wines.
Yeah, you make some good points, and just too much inventory is going to be, we hear it a lot around the industry, and there's inventory in the wholesale level as well, and there's inventory in personal sellers, and so really it really does, the sale does not stop at the sale. It's got to continue speaking with the customers and engaging them in ways that get them to consume the wine and come back in for more. There's a lot of ways that this can be done. Personally, if I was a winery, I may be sending out an email or a text message on a Friday night saying this wine's going to go excellent with your, Friday pizza or Friday tacos or something like that, and just get people to choose that wine above others and make it easy for them to make that connection. It's it's a big 1 out of 3 people, according to this, cancel for too much inventory, and it looks like an area that definitely needs to be addressed going into 2025.
Yeah, and that's where your one size does not fit all, our kind of mantra on being able to continue to engage, to continue to not be afraid to reach out, as a wine club member. I love it when people reach out to me and make suggestions. I think when you have the ability for so many different channels of engagement, whether that's emails or webinars or even text messages of what's going on at the winery or reasons to open up that bottle of wine, and those touch points become really exciting for me as a consumer. And I like to share those experiences. So speaking of retention and discounting being there, I just like to see this. I think it's important for Vinoshipper data to be here and be able to talk about what that discount spread is, right? If you're looking to be able to maintain and retain your club members, well, shipping seems free shipping or discounted shipping for a long time has been talked about as a panacea for being able to solve getting wine out of the winery and into the consumer's hands. But from the data that we're seeing, both in 2023 and 2024, and this may be regionally based more so depending on where you're at. I'm based in California, but the shipping can be a big barrier. But when you're combining both product discounting and shipping discounting, it seems like that can be the win across the board. And now I really do love the none discounting because I believe that wine is a luxury item and worth it. But at the same time, I do believe that a combination for our clients and for the wine industry as a whole seems to be the right course of action, where you're offering discounts on product, discounts on shipping, and combining them both to be able to successfully get those shipments out of the winery and into the consumer's hands. So
Yeah, it's impressive to see that more than 85% of club orders go out with a product discount. It's now looks at what customers expect, and there's a little bit of rise of shipping in both. So maybe shipping is starting to become that larger factor of wine club memberships as shipping prices, as we've seen from UPS and FedEx, continue to rise. So it's good to see that these discounts are being used. They're definitely somewhere that you should analyze again for your customer base. What is it that attracts them most to your club, and use those strategies. Check your retention rates, check what membership they're signed up to and what benefits they're getting. And that's how you're going to speak to more customers, is if you know that data internally.
yeah, data, right? Analyze your own data, see what's working for you regionally, and take that into account when you're planning marketing performance over the 2025 year.
Yeah, we've in our pre-meetings, we spoke about data too much to discuss. We always it was great. We looked at every chart and it came down to look at your data. And that's what we really believe is look at your data, look at your market. And again, that kind of spreads across all these charts and these graphs that we're looking at. I did promise earlier that we would look closer at regional sales performance. And so here we go. California, start with them. They're under indexing on sales being up. So around 22% of California producers have said their sales are up. But if you look at the Pacific Northwest, they're over indexing. They're around 35%, East Coast around 35%. These are markets that don't have as much competition as California. As we know, California has 85% of the wine producers in the United States. And I think that competition may be having an effect on total sales. And that's what people are thinking, and that's what the data is actually showing, which is, it's great when the thoughts of the industry line up with the actual data as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I do love to see the Pacific Northwest rising along with other regions. You know, myself being California centric, I always want to see California all blue. But it's really good to be able to see that breakup. And Vinoshipper works with clients across the country. And so, you know, of the 3,200 clients that we have, and this is survey data specific, but we see a really nice large swath of what's going on across the nation when it comes to wine sales. And myself, being in the California wine industry for as long as I have, I think that sometimes we can get a little doom and gloom just to our region. But when we're seeing other regions rise, you know, and seeing some of that local or regionality rise as opposed to, you know, solely the West Coast or solely California, it's good to see. You know, a high tide raises all ships. So,
Yeah, I mean, and it's also not all roses. This chart points to sales being down pretty
yeah.
equally across regions. There's other regions that, are not necessarily feeling it as much, but it's quite balanced and it points to our one size does not fit all. Some are up, some are down, some are flat, and that's pretty equal across the major regions of the US. The next chart, now this really caught us. So young businesses are reporting 65% sales are up year over year, with just around 5% saying sales are down. That's pretty different compared to 3 to 7, 8 to 15, or 16 plus years of these businesses being around. Those young businesses seem to be doing really well.
Yeah, and whether that's a different take on marketing, if that's a different take on representing in the marketplace as a whole, you know, the young startup kind of mentality of bootstrapping or whatever it may be, you know, whatever term you'd like to use. I love to see that wineries are in their early years growing. But I think it's important to also note that, you know, if you are a more mature winery, you do have some headwinds and it's being represented in this data. We were talking, Taylor, when we were saying this, well, okay, is it just a young winery, you know, and any increase is good, but it doesn't seem to be the case because they are seeing significant growth. But at the same time, you know, there's not a big retraction in the marketplace. You know, we were looking at this and seeing that we haven't seen a decline in bonded wineries in the United States over the past year. So it's not like the market is slowing down and people are moving away. It's that there's some age performance that's coming along. And is that strategy or how you know approach the market as a more mature brand? TBD. That's something that we don't get to see, but we get the beautiful job of being able to present some of the data and our findings.
The beverage alcohol market is still massive. So even though there may be a retraction, there may be feeling a retraction, especially in the larger brands or the more established brands, there's still a huge piece of pie to be taken by those that are willing to go out, try new things, um, connect with customers that they know maybe aren't being connected with. And this data is telling us that for these young wineries, they're coming into one of the most difficult time periods of wine sales, are finding a niche. And it'll be interesting to track these year over year to see how they're doing. But it's really fascinating to see that even in this difficult period, we're adding new wineries. They're managing to capture sales and they're looking successful. Even those 3 to 7 years are still having that, 50% say sales are up, with another 25% having sales flat. So that's pretty impressive for these upstarts. They're finding their niche, and it's great to see.
Yeah.
So this is a chart that everyone loves, and we love it as well because it follows what we think and what we see. But there's 15 of the top selling varietals from 2024, and then also what they did in 2023. And the fascinating thing is that they're exactly the same, except just jumbled around a bit in the middle. So Pinot Noir cannot be, taken off its seat. It is the number one selling varietal. Prices increased, as we can see, a 12% price per liter. I mean, that may speak to Oregon as well, being, a really well-established Pinot Noir region and regionally doing well. So prices are increasing, but there's also some great ones in here like Riesling and Syrah that have jumped up in rankings, and those also come with changes with increases in price per liter.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little disheartened about Cabernet Franc, one of my favorite grape varietals, being a little lower than I wanted to.
The
Uh,
price is going down though, so it may become more accessible for you.
I hope so. It's I don't think that there's too many surprises here. The premiumization of the wine space lends itself to the same thought of number one, two, and three, and four, right? So when we look at Pinot Noir, red blends, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, it makes sense that those are going to be leading the charge and will continue. It'll be interesting to see what this chart looks like extrapolated over more time to see if consumer tastes are changing at a year by year rate beyond just that standard 15 that's kind of coming through, but not too many shocks here. But at the same time, it's always good to be able to see what those varietal ranks are.
Some may be shocked to see that at $54 per liter for Cabernet, that's $40 a bottle on a national average.
Yeah.
That's a little, that's what we like about our Vinoshipper data is it takes into account the entire US. So cab's being grown all around and it's being sold and it's being sold at all different price points, which again, one size does not fit all. Cab being grown, in Napa will attract a customer that likes Napa Cab, but it's also being grown out in New York and they attract maybe different customers. And it's great to see that there's varietals and wines at all different price points and approachable price points for some higher, what is traditionally thought of as a higher value product.
Yeah.
Now this is one of your favorites, isn't it? So
Yes, it is. Absolutely, it is.
I'll let you just go for it, and then we can chat about it a bit more.
Yeah. So I love this slide. I think being able to I think of wine as an experience. I'm an avid consumer. I like to think that wineries are, I don't like this term, but like stepping out of the box to be able to have that experience. And when you look at alternate revenue streams, what's the largest non-wine, non-alcohol moneymaker for your business? And survey participant after survey participant, we're saying events, food, merchandise, always surprising, but I suppose not surprising. There's a variety of different ways for you to be able to capture some revenue, bring it into the bank, and it can still be wine focused. It can still be wine adjacent. And I think that the idea that wineries are able to utilize their property, being able to utilize whether they have a brick and mortar or potentially they don't have a brick and mortar and they're going out and doing events and being able to really start to capture some additional revenue beyond just the quintessential tasting room experience. There's a winery here on the Central Coast that does amazing concerts, and I would say that they probably see more revenue from concerts than they do wine. But at the same time, I really enjoyed this slide. I think it's great to see people branching out. At the same time, I do know that there's some constraints. In a variety of different regions, there's county legislation that doesn't allow different events. So hopefully that changes, and hopefully the county will see that there is additional revenue to be taxed, unfortunately, but being able to capture that overall. So yeah, one of my favorite slides, but I always have a hospitality hat on. So
What I love is marketing as a revenue stream. So if you events, merchandise, weddings, tours, it's marketing, it's engagement, but it's revenue as well. So it's great to see that connection. A lot of people think you have to invest into marketing but with these things they are attracting new customers And then there's a very clear ROI. If you hold an event, you can find a very clear ROI on that, which is really helpful for these wineries that are trying to make sure that they're putting their money, in the correct place. So weddings are fantastic events. Food as well just keeps people on property. People have tremendous properties, and we see them. We see them when we review websites all around the U.S. And it's great to see that they're being leveraged in ways that are non-wine or non-alcohol, because that is, as the market shifts, you can maintain this revenue. This is not going on a tremendous tour or having a wedding isn't affected by people drinking less. And so it's just great to see that people can use their properties and use their tasting rooms for additional events. But there are barriers out there, aren't there?
Yeah, a handful. A
There are a
handful.
handful. And what we found was, while you can have a great product, um, you can know your customer, but creating additional demand is one of the barriers, the largest barriers to entering new markets. The thing for me is that I would love to see creating demand as 100% of the respondents, because then that means that they're only focused on creating demand. And once they have that demand, they can meet it. What's tough to see is that distribution requirements, compliance costs, shipping logistics are all causing barriers to sales. That means that demand is there, but they can't fulfill it just due to some, complex requirements. And so when we see this at 100%, we're going to know that the market is achieving success. But until now, we need to find ways to help these producers with these other barriers.
Yeah. I think that some of them, specifically to your earlier point, that creating demand should kind of be 100% of that market barrier. When our survey respondents should put that in. I don't like to see that distribution requirements or time constraints, compliance costs actually are such a barrier. There are a variety, and I think we're going to get into this when we start talking a little bit about technology, on ways to be able to cut down the time constraints or compliance cost or shipping logistics. I think a lot of winery owners or people that are working at wineries, it's not uncommon for them to be wearing multiple hats and having to balance a lot of that. When it comes to being able to implement some technology, we saw that in the data that people are really starting to put a focus on streamlining their tech stack. And I think that's only going to benefit them. Also, when it comes to distribution requirements, that can be tough. We know that the wholesale market is a challenge right now, to say the least. I do think that there is an ability for regionally or even nationally able wineries who have the product. Some wineries are saying, I don't have enough product to sell into a distribution channel, or I'm not getting the response that I need from my distributors. But as a former wholesaler, I loved it when there was a time that a winery producer or winery owner or winemaker would spend the day with me in the field down in the LA region. I was able to really have a reason to go into accounts. The producer or winemaker or principal of the winery would be able to come in and say, this is my brand. I'm here to teach you about it all day long, and really trying to spend that time in the marketplace. The distribution requirements can be a challenge on the other side of that, as far as getting into a book, and we see that kind of across the board. But overall, I think creating demand goes back to our marketing, and being able to really start to push for it. And some of the other ones I think can be taken down a peg in actual barrier weight is the best way to
Yeah.
say it. Yeah.
Once that demand is there, you want to be able to complete it. So distribution requirements and time constraints. Time constraints is tough because you do need some time to create the demand, but all the other aspects really should hopefully not be there. We really need the market to allow it to breathe, right? So
Yeah.
allowing people to really go out, sell their products, and then make sure that product gets to the consumer that has the demand. That's what's going to be really important. And as we move forward, we see that technology is a massive helper. So we asked the survey wineries, what was your best ROI, return on investment in technology this year? And we can see it's POS systems, which 1/3 of people invested in a POS system. That totally makes sense. The tasting room's the number one revenue stream. It's the highest, impact point. But then you go down to club management, marketing automation, order fulfillment, compliance software, and inventory tracking. And when I think of those, I think there should be one system to do all of them. So that's what's seems to be important nowadays. I mean, every one of these should be able to be in the same system and communicating and sharing the data. As wineries are one person to 100 people, and these systems need to be built to fit the whole mold. One size does fit all here when you're using technology. Yeah, everyone from the smallest producer to the largest producer has the same constraints. And if the technology is not supporting them, then we can see that there is being a clear investment into POS systems and other management systems that are supposedly probably making it easier, giving them time back, which in their eyes, or even more money, is a great ROI.
Agreed. Agreed. I think that if you're able to streamline your tech stack, if you're able to rely on a handful of vendors that are doing their job exceptionally well, then it really starts to cut down on that administrative time. It really starts to cut down on errors or issues trying to make systems talk to one another. And we see that over and over again. And there are so many really good point of sale systems in the marketplace right now that have that ability. And I think people are really starting to come onto it. Vinoshipper, we've got API integrations with Orderport and Commerce 7 and Shopify, just to name a few. And I think that those really, really do look forward in a period of years where technology is needing to communicate with one another. It is no longer a manual process that was available or the industry standard 5, 6, 7 years ago. And it's really, really good to see. And I like to see that people are investing in their technology specific to the point of sale system, 100%.
Yeah, I mean, and at Vinoshipper, we listen to our customers, and this is all built into the platform. We completely understand, from one person to 500, that more simple the software, the better, the more time, the more sales you can make, and collect the data all in one place. Because at the end of the day, if data is in two places, they say that one is wrong. So it's, complete the stack, get the data, analyze it, mark it. Wow, we're running in circles here. So that's great to see. What's our next slide here? So our, hypothesis for this year is what you put in is what you get out. And we can see that with the small upstart wineries. We can see that with the smaller regions. We've seen that for producers that don't have tasting rooms that are doing well indexed to the general market. People that are hustling this year or last year seem to, be getting the benefits. That large piece of the pie is still there for the taking, but it's not going to be given. It seems like now is the time to go out and take that piece of the pie with a strategy that works for you.
Yeah, and coming into the first quarter, coming into looking into the second and third quarters, I know that creating a marketing campaign or being able to schedule timing or being able to create these events can take time. But when we look at meeting customers where they are, well, that's not just getting out into the field. There's a great story of a winery on the Central Coast that they would analyze their data and they would go out to their major market and spend the time. But I think that's a beautiful thing for them to do. And it really, really allowed them to have a touch with their members and create new members along the way. But at the same time, in where we're at now, being able to meet customers where they are can be via text or via
Mm-hmm.
email or so
Yep.
many other, all these different channels of being able to make sure that your brand is top of mind or something that somebody's reaching for first. And I think that's really, really interesting of where the industry is at right now and looking towards a bright 2025, despite some of the challenges.
Yeah, Silicon Valley Bank had this one right a few years ago. Take the show on the road, meet the customers where they are. But I think we take that another level, and it's meeting them, in the right channels, and not necessarily is going to be face to face, but like you said, it's going to be um, campaigns. It could be Instagram reels. It could be live streaming production at the winery. It's meeting your demographic customers, those people that you want to connect with, where they spend their most time. And there's a lot of good data out there outside of the wine industry um, on buying personas and what type of people connect with what way. And so I would just say, look outside, look to what's working in other industries, luxury and fashion, and see what strategies these people are using. That's where I go when I'm often looking. So what might work for the wine industry? I'll go jump over to fashion and see what they're doing there. Um, and really, we know in fashion, a lot of it's marketing. So it's I don't really know how to close this, but it's, focus on really focus on yourself for this year. Get hyper localized. Isn't that right? We were saying this in our practice runs, is that be localized with your data, be localized with your customers, but be willing to then learn from that and expand into where more of those customers are. And it doesn't have to be a one-man show either. You can create
True.
co-ops. Tara Jane was telling us of a great story of producers coming together and taking their wines on the road and doing a group showing of wine, sharing customers because they knew they had similar, customer profiles, and that's a great little story. But there's a lot to be done, and you're gonna get out what you put in, and it's really there for the taking. We feel this year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a it's going to be a challenging year, I believe. But there's definitely ways to be able to uh, skin the proverbial cat and be able to make sure that you're able to not just have your brand awareness and be able to drive sales, but embrace some of that data and create marketing campaigns. And I'm not a marketer, but I see this from a back view and know that there are so many wineries that are already doing this and already being successful. And it's exciting in this time of the industry to be able to watch all of these brands really start to embrace and create, more importantly, the brand awareness that's needed in the marketplace to be able to meet those customers.
2025 is there for the taking. That is the one. And so with that, I want to thank George. I want to thank Win. Paul, thank you also for joining. Um, we loved going through the survey data. We loved reading it. It was fascinating. And I hope that you all enjoyed, our analysis of this um, today. And the more participants we get, the better the analysis is. And so we look forward to doing this year over year and sharing these insights and creating this longer term kind of report with our view of the industry, which again, Paul and I were talking about this. There's not just one, don't use just one data source on the industry. There's loads of great data out there coming from all different providers, and it can all be used together. It's find the data that's going to fit your winery and connect with that and reach out and talk to others in the same place. And then, the rising tide lifts all boats. So with that, thank you so much. George, I'll pass it off to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Taylor. Thank you, Paul. I thought that was really good, super interesting. There were a couple of things that jumped out at me in particular. The one where the slide we had looked at club cancellation and having too much inventory. I thought that was really interesting. And Paul, I'm guilty as well of like belonging to a club that I wound up canceling my membership because I had too much wine, right? And this is something I haven't seen a lot of like, finding ways to encourage people to drink that wine that they've got in their last shipment or the shipment before that, right? So you can make room for the next order. That's something that I think we should be talking a little bit more about uh, because I don't see a lot of that out there. You guys seeing the same thing?
I just,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
No, Paul, up to you.
I look at it from my own little worldview, right? And I want to be able to find a reason to open these bottles of wine, but maybe I have kind of a collection mentality and not a consumption mentality. And I think being able to kind of turn that into a what would pair well tonight, or do these bottles need to lay down for another year? Well, okay, they've laid down for another year. Well, I've gotten 2 or 3, potentially 4 shipments on top of that. So in my own little worldview, I guess my solution is I should be drinking more. But that's my take on it.
I just think sometimes just a simple reminder of like what I have, and it doesn't, and what's nice about that, it's not a sales pitch, right? It's just a little gentle reminder like, hey, if you haven't tried the 2022 Zin, it's drinking great right now. Open that bottle. I don't think it needs to be complicated, but I thought that was a really interesting slide. The other, remember, obviously there are more than a few, but just a couple to comment on. I love the slide that talked about the growth for the newer wineries. Now, of course, they're what they're comparing is sort of they don't have a lot of history, right? So you should expect some growth. But I also suspect, and again, this is more anecdotal than anything else, that they're breaking some of the traditional rules, right? So they're new, they're not confined by the thought process of I need to do what I'm doing. Why? Because that's the way we've always done that, right? They don't really have that type of a burden. So I suspect that some of these new guys are doing things a little bit different, a little bit more approachable, and maybe taking some lessons that I think we should be taking from the craft beer and spirits world.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say the larger producers can't do this as well. They have the resources, they have the data. It's just a matter of kind of breaking the mold of what your brand may be known for and finding that new customer base. Looking at your product line and saying, do I have SKUs that address different types of drinkers? Do I have a approachable wine, at a $20 price point, and then a high value wine at over 100, or am I just in the middle? And so it's just kind of looking at that. And as these small producers are, and they're coming out and they're being a bit scrappy and they're just doing what they like. But these other wineries have the resources to do it as well. So it'll be great to see, if people get a bit creative with their SKUs and or maybe even, collaborate with these smaller wineries. That's a great, way to do it. And there's a lot of opportunity out there.
Yeah, I suspect it's also like an energy factor, right? So the new guys have just like they're raring to go. They're ready to take on the world. And you get some of the, I think the last slide were wineries that have been around for 16 or 17 years or more. Sometimes I think it's just, sometimes complacency can settle in. And so that's I think a challenge for some of our more established producers. But to your point, Taylor, I think if you want to make the most of 2025, you need to be willing to do things differently and get out there and again maybe make some changes and just again do things a little bit differently than you have in the past. Another interesting slide that I wanted to ask you guys about because you're working with obviously you're established here in California, but you're well established outside of California. So I thought it was interesting to see some of the feedback that you got from regions outside of California. And, at a glance, don't seem to be as impacted. You don't see as much, negative news as you see here in California. And I just wonder if part of that has to do with, it's, coming to wine country. I don't care if you're going to be up here. We're up here in the North Coast or you're down the Central Coast or other regions of California. It's especially up here in the North Coast, it can be pretty expensive to go spend a weekend in wine country. And I wonder if some of these other regions are doing really well because they're not having to deal with the same sort of hurdles that we are here in California as it relates to expense.
Yeah, we had the same hypothesis, in that doing a full experience in California wine country, whether that be Napa, Sonoma. I will say Paso is, I think a bit of an anomaly in California at the moment. They seem to be doing tremendous in terms of experience, price point. Um, Airbnbs are a little cheaper in the Central Coast.
Yeah.
So that's a great region. Again, it's localized, but if you group that area in with California, because they're not doing the same volume as other regions, they're going to be grouped into the ones that's a decline. But we're not saying the industry is doing great. We want to kind of give the shout out to those that are doing well and that are trying new things. But yeah, you're right. I saw a tasting fee pop up that was $15 for a beer, a wine, and a spirit, and you got to keep the glass with each one. I was like, that's tremendous, and I think that was out somewhere in Alabama. And so yeah, each region is so unique. And so we just like to highlight that, and we see the data because we support producers from all of those regions. So, it's just great to see that there's areas and pockets that are doing well.
Yeah, well, those regions are really important to the industry as a whole because I think in a lot of ways, some of these emerging wine regions, and some of that are even more established, let's say up and down the East Coast, just a great way to get people more comfortable with wine and drinking wine, and then once they begin their journey, they're going to transition onto other things. They're going to want to try different types of wines from different types of regions. So I think as an industry, it's important that we continue to support, regions across the country and encourage people to visit their local wineries as well. Well, listen, guys, once again, Taylor, Paul, I thought you did a great job. I want to thank Vinoshipper for all the hard work that you did, your team did to put this presentation together. And of course, I want to thank everyone in our audience for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the webinar, go ahead and make sure you like our YouTube channel, and we'll keep you posted on more webinars to come.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.